Alright, so here's the homework for week 2. It's basically similar to week 1. You just gotta fix up this stuff, make it look like the goal. And let's just break it down. So this first one is about pivot points and parenting. You'll notice if you have your outliner open, you can see all these shapes and stuff. You can select through on all of them. Any object in the scene, any light, any joint. The outliner is really important to know about for Maya. You can find it in Windows Outliner. You'll notice that let me shrink my outliner here. As I scrub on the timeline, you'll see that crane is rotating. It's an animated object. And our goal is to sort of hang this on that and have it rotate with that crane. So how we do that is you'll notice that my pivot point is just way off from where I want it to be. I want to kind of talk about snapping so we can get this perfect. I want to hang this little notch, the underside of that notch, on the top of this hook, right? So what we want to do is you can hold D or insert, and notice how my manipulator changes, and now I can move this around. It's not moving the object because I'm just moving that pivot point. If I press insert again, you'll notice that it's pivoting from that new point that I just set. So if I press insert, and then if I use some of my snapping tools up here, I'm going to hold V to snap to vertices. And if I grab the inside of this, notice how my pivot point is snapping to verts on that object. Let's put that in the center of this. And then I wanna get it up to this point right here. So I can just hold V and drag it up there. You can also just snap on any axis and then drag over to point in space, and it will snap to that location, but on that specific axis. So if you wanted to break it up that way. So now I'm going to press insert to get out of that mode. And then now I can hold V again, and I can just snap it to a vert on that crane right there. And then it's a little bit offset, so I'm kind of going to move that inward right there. So that's step 1, changing the pivot point and then snapping it to an object. Step 2 is making it rotate with this bad boy, right? So basically you'll see that this crane is actually 3 objects in a hierarchy. So as this crane 1 moves, crane 2 and 3 will move because they're children of this parent. They call this child and parenting. And just to demonstrate that, see how when I rotate that, it moves around. When I rotate this, the children move as well. So basically what we need to do is include this ornament in this hierarchy. You can, in the outliner, you can, in the outliner, middle click drag that ornament into this hierarchy, or you can click the child and then the parent, shift click them, or if you're in the outliner, control click. But in here we can just click the child and then shift click the parent and then press P, and then notice that that ornament is now in there and it moves accordingly. Again, you can also middle click drag it to that crane, so now that ornament is right under that crane 3 object, and there you go. Awesome. Now this one, it is just soft selecting. So first of all, this one has a lot more geometry to it. Notice how I only have a few subdivisions on this bad boy. So let's duplicate this. Let's move it past. And I'm going to show you the smooth button right here. Smooth. There's also edit mesh. Oh wait, sorry, mesh smooth. They're the same tool right there. And then you can just get that as smooth as you want. And then go into face mode or vertex mode or edge mode, any of these, but if you click on a point and then press B, you're going to go into soft select mode. So in soft select mode, you can start moving around multiple points at once. if you click on your tool options right here and go into soft selection, you can change the fall off curve as well. So if you change it to a smooth one like this, notice how that first pull came up to a point like that. If you do a soft one like that, it's going to be, you're going to get really smooth, a really smooth profile to that soft selection there. So that's that. This next one is about edge flow and topology. Basically, you need to connect these two pieces, but you need to reroute some of these edge loops. You need to kind of redirect them into themselves in order to have the proper amount of edge loops there. And you can see in the goal, you can see how, it'll be more visible if I go into face mode. If I just click this and then shift double click this, it selects the whole edge loop of those faces, and you can see that they just loop into each other there. So that's what we're going for. And on the same side, on the other side, same workflow there, just slightly different result. This goes from, remember this always goes from, it just reduces the amount of edge loops you have going across the mesh this way by 2. So see how we started with 4 and then we end up with 2. And then we start with 3 and then we end up with 1. So it just reduces that by 2. And that, you'll see that commonly used when you're modeling to reduce the amount of edges on a certain part of the model. And so how we do that is, first step, we're going to go into edge mode and then move this back. I'll move this back as well, and then I'm going to extrude out that edge that I just pulled back, and then I'm going to go to target weld and just target weld those new sides right there to that. And then the last step is that we just bridge across. So just select those 4 edges, click bridge, boom, right there, done. This one we can just bridge straight across, but then this one, same method as before. Move this front edge back into the rest of the higher density geometry, and then extrude out, and then target weld. And then for these ones, you can just bridge across. Boom, perfect. Now this is a bit more complicated. This is we're just making a whole guitar, and I want to show you that that's basically I'm going to construct this out of a bunch of different shapes, right? And you already know the tools for a lot of these. Now, when you just looking at this shape, I want you to be thinking of the edge flow of this, right? So you'd have clearly a subdivision across the middle, subdivision across this center as well, and here. And then to make this inset, though, you're going to need a loop in here. And usually on these shapes, you like to have an edge loop sort of on the outside of that, establishing it. And I'll show you what I mean when you, like, especially with multi-cut. So you want to have this sort of ring shape around that, right? You're not going to be able to define that hole to begin with, but then you have this retaining sort of edge on the outside of that, right? So then you have a whole loop creating that shape, and then the actual definition of the ring in there. We could also, you can see that I did the same thing, but on a smaller scale on the edge with a bevel. So the entire edge of the guitar has that sort of retaining shape as well. But yeah, so without further ado, let's get into this. So first we make the body out of this. So I'm going to just scale this rectangle into the approximate size of that. So you can see it's about there, right? Then next step, we got to get that subdivision in the middle. And then, so this is the part that we're going to squeeze in to make this interior part. So I might as well just show you guys. 1 second. Vertex. So I'll show you guys. So see how we're kind of getting generally close to that shape. Next, I want to subdivision down the middle because we should always have one down the axis of symmetry. So I'm going to do Control, and then I'm going to middle mouse click on that edge in multi-cut mode. So I went to multi-cut, Control, middle mouse click right there. And that'll just set you up with a subdivision in the middle. That should really be the first step, but yeah, sorry about that. Next, we're going to add a subdivision there. And so add a subdivision on the base. Now, the reason we did that is because I need to maintain this sort of bowing out in the center. So I'm just left click dragging through all of those verts right there, and I'm going to scale them apart. I could also go into Symmetry, Object X, and then you'll see that we could affect them that way. So I'm just grabbing those, and make sure you're only moving on the red and blue axis, right? So if I try to mess with this and drag it to a certain point, notice how I've fallen off of having a nice flat region in Y, right? In the Y axis, up and down axis. So make sure you're only moving on red and blue. You can grab this box to move on both at the same time. Very useful. Very useful tool right there. I'm dragging this back. And so next we need to have a few more subdivisions to get just a bit more definition in there. Like, look at the detail of that body versus my current one. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm adding 2 right here and then 2 along the or 1 along the length of it. So we can go back in. Let's go back into vert mode, and we're just gonna keep dragging and polishing the position of those verts. You know. And we're doing the same here. And yeah, sure, let's do one more there. All right, next step is that we need that hole, right? We need that. And I'm going to basically just be moving these top verts. I'm not dragging through anymore. I want to note. I'm not dragging through the mesh because I don't want to mess with these bottom ones because they don't have the hole. But let's set up our geometry to give us some space for that. So I'm just selecting these verts and then moving them with the move tool as always. 90% of your stuff is just going to be move tool and rotate tool. So now I have that hole set up. And next, let's get this into position. Now if I extrude inward, sometimes in symmetry being on, it doesn't work nicely, but it seems to here. So I'm going to undo that, but let's just click these. I wonder if circularize works. Let's see, if you go to Edit Mesh, Circularize, because we want this to be a nice circle. Nice, beautiful. So Circularize will just make that a nice circle for us, and then we can proceed to just click those faces, Control E for an extrude, and let's go just drag this offset in a little bit. Boom. And let's extrude again, push down, and then delete. Well, there you go. Perfect. And then our body is basically done there. So what we need to do now is press, get another cube in there. Let's create the neck. Let's actually get this on the grid. So I'm going to hold X, and then I'm going to move over. There we go. Perfect. So I'm just going to scale this cube down. And then let's scale it a little bit wide, and let's do a multi-cut on the middle of it. Remember, if you're defining that axis of symmetry with the multi-cut and then the middle click, don't have symmetry on. Turn that off. Mine gets real confused when you have that on and you're trying to make that line of symmetry. Every time you make an object, you've got to be aware of that. So next, let's go into vertex mode. Let's push this out. to a decent length, and then let's go into face mode and pull this down, edge mode, pull that down, and then let's multi-cut across here. Let's actually activate symmetry again, so we don't have to worry about, oh, sorry about that. So we don't have to worry about, let's find our modeling toolkit there, very nice. So we don't have to worry about having these edges be perfectly matched. So let symmetry take care of that. Okay, so we have that. Next up is that we need to kind of create this head, you know, and we also need to create a little bridge. So we need a subdivision to sort of pull out of that. Like if I tried to create that bridge by extruding right now, look what would happen. Like I would go in and be like, okay, it's time for this. Extrude. Oh, it's extruding that entire previous those entire previous faces. So what we want to do instead is select all these faces at the top. A fast way of doing that is just dragging through and then holding Control and dragging everything you don't need. Very fast way of selecting that. Rather than, like, if this had a lot more faces on it, it would take substantially longer. What I'm going to do is extrude this out a little bit, and then I'm going to extrude it outward again, and this is going to be the head of that. Let's angle that downward a little bit. Next up, let's make that bridge. There we go, and I'm just going to scale that down. And then let's go to the head. See how it's shaped nicely like that. So let's get that sort of effect in here as well. I'm gonna make that one. I'm gonna make one multi-cut, another multi-cut, and then one in between at least. And let's just go into edge. A fast way of selecting all these edges is just to double click it, and that will select an edge loop. Any edge loop that you have. Notice how this one selects all the way down the length, and then since it doesn't know which way to go after there, it kind of stops at this 3-point junction. But yeah, so fast way to select edge loops, just double click it, and I'm just going to scale that out. I'm going to scale this one out. Very nice. Very nice. And then let's get this to be a little bit more sloped inwards, so I'm going to select that and scale inward, select that, scale inward as well. Boom, bang. There you go. Alright, next up is to create the tuning pegs right here. The way we're going to do that is, I mean, it always helps to look at the object, but notice how this is basically this entire part right here coming off. You can tell that it's an extrusion because it's extending out, right? Pretty much anything that extends out could be an extrusion. Like these fingers, that could be extrusions. I could have made this with extrusions as well, extruding out from that base, but since that was rotating, I decided to keep it a separate object. But let's start with a cube, classic, and I'm just going to get this shape of the peg first, and then I'm going to go for extruding out that this cylinder from this shape. So this is this is going to be the base. What I also want to do is have that tapering effect of these, so I'm going to select my faces on the left and right. I could also do this in symmetry, so if I turn on object, it would be object Z, because now I'm modeling this kind of rotated 90 degrees from where we normally would, so it would be object Z rather than object X. I'm going to click both those faces, Control E, and then change the thickness of that and scale it inward like that. Boom, perfect. Next up is trying to get this because this creates that basic shape of this peg, right? But then what we need to do is create that extrusion for the peg itself, and what we're going to do is Control E. We're going to turn down the offset a little bit, and then we're going to go to, we're going to do that circularize again. Might as well. And then you have this perfect, nice circle to extrude out, and tuning peg finished. Now we need to just scale it down to the proper size and then place it all up and down that guitar. So 3 on each side. And I'm just rotating them arbitrarily. I'm also just going to click all of them and bring them over to the other side. And I'm going to use snapping with my rotate to make them 90 degrees. Hopefully they rotate on the correct axis. If you hold J, that's going to enable snapping, and then we can just rotate them 90 degrees like that. Nice. Simple. And place those there. And the last bit of detailing, we need the strings, and then we need the little place where the strings insert. Also, yeah, duplicate was Control D. Sorry about that. Forgot to call that out. But let's just create a cube. And what I'm going to do with this cube is I'm just going to multi-cut on it. Remember, when you're defining that first axis of symmetry, you have to have symmetry off. So otherwise Maya gets confused. I'm going to press Control, middle mouse click on this axis, and then same way that we did with the cup, I'm going to scale these inward. You could of course create a cylinder and do this, but I want to show you how to do it with a cube, right? I'll show you how to do it with the cube. And I'm just going to scale on both of these axes right there, and then scale out, and then let's get those into position. See how they fit on there. So that's looking pretty good. We can adjust the scale a little bit more. Let's have them actually insert into that board right there. And then let's move this up a little bit. And then I'm going to scale it a little bit more down. I'm going to duplicate. And then if you press Shift D, I just duplicated and then press W to move it over. Then I'm going to press Shift D to redo that. We can get 6 strings right there. Because Shift duplicate, it duplicates with whatever offset that you just applied to that previous duplicate. It's a little bit weird, but it's fast, you know. So I wanted to show you that as well. So let's create one last cube for this shape right here. Let's scale it down. And then we're going to go into multi-cut mode and let's define that axis of symmetry, and then we can turn on symmetry. This one, it's going to be object X because we're on the, we have the object, we have the X-axis being left and right here, so we're going to be doing symmetry along that. Let's go into face mode. Let's extrude. Let's extrude again. And we can just take that face and kind of just move it down. I'm going to get another extrusion in there just for a smooth transition on that. Let's multi-cut here to get an even smoother transition up there. See that? So that was just to smooth out that curve right there. And then we have a nice little guitar. Now you notice that when I select that guitar, it's all one shape. In order to do that, you just drag select through everything and do we do a mesh combine. There you go. And it's going to use the new pivot point is whatever you had last, whatever object you had last selected. You can also go to modify center pivot, and that'll just put it at the center of the object if you'd like. But that's optional for me. So now next, the hand, very difficult as well. These two are definite upgrades in terms of what we've been doing. And I'll just show you a nice way to create the hand. So starting from that shape, we can just go in here. I'm going to do a multi-cut here. Also, I'm going to save the scene just so we don't lose a bunch of progress. I'm also going to multi-cut along the middle here. Again, that's Control middle click with multi-cut activated. And let's just get that shape of the hand, of the palm established first, right? Let's get that palm established right there. And then we can go to object mode. And basically these fingers are going to be extrusions, right? Each of these fingers is going to be an extrusion because you can see that there's an edge loop around the base of them. That's a telltale sign that you're going to be extruding. But then we also have that webbing in between. So in order to get that, we're going to need to do some bridging across from the top to bottom. It's going to be a little bit of a setup. And then this thumb is also an extrusion. So what we can do is once we have a nice palm shape, this palm shape isn't fantastic, but it'll do. Just for the purposes of this exercise. It doesn't look very organic. But let's go in, and basically we have 4 fingers, we have 4 subdivisions here. We're going to need a few more on that. So if we multi-cut, and I'm just going to do Control middle click on this. Oops, right there. Because I just want to set up that density right there, you know. And then to make the webbing, we're going to select these 2 right here. And we're going to bridge across right there. And then immediately when you bridge, multi-cut in the center of that. Now let's scale that inward with R. I'm just selecting those edges. There you go. So that's the webbing. I want to just show you that first. Then we need to make the webbing between the ring and the middle finger. So we're going to click those edges and then we're going to bridge across. Then we're going to multi-cut. I'm going to scale that multi-cut down. Boom. There we go. And then these, multi-cut across. And scale that one in. Boom. Perfect. Alright. So, be careful, guys. Don't extrude this yet, right? Because if you count up your edges, you'll find. Ooh, I've been bridging across the back there because I had symmetry on. Whoops, 1 second. Let me turn that off, and then let's delete these faces. Sorry about that, y'all. Sorry. Boom. There we go. Alright. So don't extrude these yet, right? Because you'll see that you have 1, 2. Oops, 1. Oh my gosh. 1, 2, 3, 4 edge loops or spans on this side. You have 4 edges on this side, and then you only have 2 on the inside. So what we need to do is add 2 more. Boom. I'm just going to cut towards the top and the bottom there. Do that on all of these. Normally I'd do this step later, but I find it's confusing for students if I save this the webbing for later. So I'm going to put the webbing first now. We're trying to make sure everything's clear. Here we go. So now if I count up the edges on each of these little circles, let's bring this a little bit over to the right because that pinky should be smaller, you know. So now if we count up our edges on all of these, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? So it's 4 on one side, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 4 on the other side. So we have a nice even number. When you're making any sort of complex character or anything like that, always try to shoot for an even number of edges on each side of these sorts of shapes. So back in here, I'm going to go to Edit Mesh, Circularize. I'm just going to do that with all these. Ooh, that didn't work out too well. So let's not do it on that one. Let's move Let's move this vert towards the front again. Kind of fix that shape, that circularized, kind of crushed it into a smaller shape that I don't really want. So let's scale that down. Boom, there we go. Okay, and so now we can select, just double click any hole, any edge on a hole, and then it will just auto select all of those in there. And we're going to pull this out. And then we're going to scale it in like this, and then we're going to also scale it on all axes. So I scaled in on X, and then I scaled in on all right there. We can go to Mesh, Fill Hole, and then Multi-Cut, and Multi-Cut across. So again, for that last multi-cut, you click that left vert on this big face that we have, because that fill hole made like an 8-sided face, so we need to divide that up and reestablish the edge flow. So if we click that left vert and this right vert and then press enter, it has a cut across there. So now our edge flow goes across that and leads into the rest of the fingers. We really want to maintain that for topology. I'm noticing this is a little bit off center as well, so let's rotate that in. And there we go. So now we have one finger kind of represented. What we want to do is, I want to show you guys kind of extracting and sort of Frankensteining on these objects. So what we're going to do is polish up the shape of this finger, and then we're going to cut it off and duplicate it for the other 4 fingers. So we only have to model 1 finger. Okay. So first steps first, I want to sort of cut along where the digits are. So you'll notice when I inserted that edge loop, it's all kind of uneven because this first, the length of these edges is kind of inconsistent. So what we want to do is double click that new multi-cut and then scale that in. So now we have just a nice even span across there. Next, we're going to do the same for this middle digit right there. Perfect. And then let's also start just refining the shape of this fingertip, right? This is our fingertip, so we want to make sure it kind of looks organic, right? Like right now it's just very blocky, as if this were almost some sort of Minecraft character. We're not trying to make Minecraft right now. We're trying to make some nice 3D objects. So here we go. So now we have that. I'm going to make an edge loop right there, and let's pull up this a little bit, because if you look at your fingers from the side profile, they kind of come in at those joints inside. Let's get this going right there. Later when we're animating hands as well, it always helps to have an extra loop of edges around any of those sorts of shapes in there. Alright, so that's one finger represented pretty nicely. We could add a little bit more definition to this. So if I wanted a more gradual corner, as always, I need to just add some geometry there, right? Let's pull that in. Let's pull this in as well. Very nice. Very nice. Alright, next up, I want to create that fingernail, right? I have a cool looking fingernail on those other ones, so let's do that over here too. So I'm going to just take those top faces and I'm insetting that shape, right? You can see that I have on here a nice edge loop in there. So let's just do that over here. So if remember, whenever you extrude, you're going to get an edge loop around your selection. So if you see that sort of shape, you know it was an extrusion. And let's do offset, and I'm getting way too crazy of values here. It's kind of breaking that look. So if you hold Control and Shift, you get a more gradual amount in there. So let's do that. Next, I'm just going to kind of rotate that for the shape of that cuticle in there. And I'm going to extrude that up. And you have a nice little fingernail. So that's just 2 extrusions that make that. It's a nice fingernail. If you wanted to extend it past for some crazy sharp fingernails, then you'd extrude these front faces, but this is fine for our purposes. So next, I'm going to show you guys how to cut this off from the other object and then duplicate it around it. You could, of course, just Control D and then move that and then delete the other faces, but if we want to solo out that finger, also, as always, remember, you can always soften your edges by going to Mesh Display, Soften Edge, and then you can get a nice shape. Otherwise, you'll have a bunch of hard edges all over the object. It won't look as nice. But yeah, in order to solo out that finger, what we can do is select. I'm going to select all the faces that I want to cut off, and then yeah, select that edge loop. The way I did that was just drag selected through all those, and then shift click one of these, and then shift double click this next one. It just selects that whole edge loop. So if you get used to those selection tools, you're going to be very fast. So next step, we're going to go to Edit Mesh, Face, Extract, and now we have a separate object right there. So we can just duplicate that one finger. Remember, you can modify, center that pivot on there. Then we can duplicate this finger around a couple more times. And then we can also just start scaling them, you know? That middle finger is a little bit longer than all the other ones, right? So we can get that out here. The ring finger is a little bit big too. And then that pinky is, of course, very small. So let's scale that down and move that inward. All right. Next up, we've got to get these to fit on these fingers, right? So it's just going to be a matter of moving these edges. Oops. So I went into 4 mode, which is wireframe, so I could select some of those edges down there. It gets real confusing if you haven't seen it before, but as you become used to 3D stuff, it'll make a lot more sense when you do that. But yeah, so let's get these aligned nicely. Very cool. I might just delete this finger because I don't want to redo all that edge moving around. We can just duplicate this one, bring it over. Simple. I might say the same for that pinky. Come to think of it. And let's scale that down and move it into position. Nice. So now we have our fingers. Next up, we need to start attaching these together, right? We need to attach all of these hand pieces. And the way we're going to do that is by target welding, but you can't target weld between 2 separate objects. They have to be one mesh first, and it's that last step that we showed on that guitar, but I'll just show it here again. If you select all these objects with the drag selection right there, and then do mesh combine, now they're all one mesh, but you'll see that if you go into face mode and start double clicking on things, that they're still not connected. Even if they look like they're like close, even if the verts look like they're on top of each other, those verts still need to be welded together. So what we do is go to our target weld tool. I'm going to use edge because it's going to be a bit faster. You get to do a few verts at a time. And we're just going to weld all of those fingers to the socket that they belong. Sometimes let's do the inverse, because I liked where my fingers were in space a little bit more than where I had the hand mesh, you know. And same for this one. Let's move this up here. Whoops. Control Z if you ever mess up. There we go. And then I'm just going to bring all these to the pinky because the pinky's small. We want the hand to blend nicely into that, you know. So let's abide by where the pinky is. Very nice. All right, next up is just refining the shape of that, right? I want to move this pinky a little bit back into that hand. And I want to clean up the webbing for this. I want to move this closer. So let's click that vert. Let's bring the rest of this webbing back, because these kind of go further into the hand, right? Around those knuckle shapes. They go further in. So let's put them down as well. There you go. Now you got some nice fingers with some nice webbing in between. Very good, very good. And very similar process for the thumb. Except there's only one of them, so we don't have to worry about the duplicating and extracting and all that jazz. We can just go in. I'm going to create just a few spans right there. Notice how I made 2 cuts across, right? So it's now I have these faces, and their edge loops total to 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 edges on the outside of that, and I can just extrude this, and then we're gonna really have to fight the shape of them, you know, but that's fine. So this is gonna become the thumb in a little bit. And let's just rotate that in space. I'm just trying to get a nice round shape there. We could try that circularize tool again. It's a nice one. Add a mesh. It might really mess up the shape of it though. Oh, no, pretty nice. Pretty nice. I'm going to extrude that as well. And you notice that the thumb has sort of 2 joints right there. So this would go right there, and then we make that last joint of the thumb. And so yeah, same sort of setup that we did for the fingers. Just without the whole duplicating and extracting process. I'm also kind of keeping it a little bit more rotated. Notice how if your thumb is at rest, it's kind of rotating out to the side, you know. So I'm trying to get that same sort of shape going there. And then we can pull back all these, make a nice thumb shape. I'm just kind of rounding that shape up, you know. It's going to take some orbiting around with the camera to get a really nice shape in there. But that's what it's about. That's what modeling is all about. Then we can multi-cut across here. And then more gradual, get some more gradual rounding at the front of that. looking pretty decent. Pretty decent. Very nice. Alright, so we can click those. Control E, I'm going to just do like a little offset. And then let's rotate that down a little bit. Then we can Control E again. And we have a fingernail. Very nice. Doesn't look perfect, but that's fine. I kind of just wrap things up here. Next, we've got to do some subdivisions here. So let's get this going. This part looks really messed up on a second glance. The underside of that. But yeah, there you go. That's the hand. Now remember, if you have that hard sort of shape, just click here, mesh display, soften edge, boom. But yeah, so that's how you do that hand assignment. And then the last thing is to model whatever you want. Model something that you want to model. I don't want to limit creativity too much on this, but yeah, just model whatever you're interested in, you know. And yeah, awesome stuff, my guys. All right, I'll see you next time. Good luck.